Well, oh, absolutely. So nice here in the woods, so calm. Okay, well, I'm just gonna do a quick flight and then I'll come home. All right, love you. Bye. Alright, there you go. That's my little short film that I made using the DJI O3 system. I was flying the Beta FPV Pavo 20 Pro, which has the integrated DJI O3 system built right into it. And I love this little drone. It's really fun. You can see from the shots, it's just, you take it in tight spaces, it does really, really well. Super cool. But the whole point of this shot was really to push the limits of the DJI O3 system in a difficult lighting situation. When you're in the dark forest, you have really, really dark shadows and you have really, really bright highlights. And the DJI O3 system isn't really known for the greatest dynamic range. And so ultimately, I was just trying to see if we can make the DJI O3 footage look any good. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the raw footage, and I'll talk about the camera settings that I used and the steps that I did to create this short film. So the first thing I did was I used Gyroflow to stabilize the footage. Now I used some pretty generic settings. I used pretty low stabilization because this drone itself actually is pretty stable already. And as long as you're kind of maintaining a smooth line, you don't need a ton of stabilization. But one thing I do like is actually the correction of the lens. And so what I use for the correction of the lens is actually only 25%. Some people crank it up to 50 or 100. But I find 25% kind of keeps a little bit of fisheye, but also kind of keeps it looking good. And so here is the shot now that we've added some stabilization. It's nice and smooth. You're getting that nice pass-through of movement. And, you know, pretty cool. Little crash there. But anyway, so I used Gyroflow stabilization. I don't need to go into that too much in this video. So we're going to jump back over here to Final Cut Pro. All right, so right here you can see that we have the raw footage that has now been stabilized, but I have otherwise no other color corrections done to it. So I'm going to jump to this section here, and I'll just start walking through the different corrections. One thing I like to use is this color curves here. And that really allows you to affect the individual highlights and shadows of everything. And you just kind of have to work at it and get it to work how you want. Now what you're going to notice is I've actually used keyframes to adjust the light depending on where I am. Now since the exposure itself is locked with the camera, that allows me to very easily manipulate the exposure in post, which is what we're doing here in Final Cut Pro. If you set it up so it has a variable ISO or a variable shutter speed, your lighting is going to be changing all the time, and that actually, in my personal opinion, makes it really difficult to edit after in post. But if you don't use variable shutter, it's also difficult to get it properly exposed because you could have some really, really dark areas and some really bright areas. So it really just depends on the shot, but if you can, I highly recommend that you just use fixed shutter, fixed ISO, just lock that exposure so you don't have to deal with fluctuations as you're trying to edit later. And so then once you do that, you can actually do all of your edits here. And so if we turn off the color curves, you're going to see this is it. You can see that I kind of brought up the shadows. I added a little bit more dynamic range, and that's what it looks like. You can see there. But then the hue and saturation. So what I did here was actually I adjusted the colors quite a bit in this shot. And that's because I wanted to get that nice, warm, kind of yellow, because that's what it looked like in real life. It kind of had this neat neon color with the grass and the moss. And so you can see here, that's how I've adjusted the colors using this cool color hue and saturation tab here. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the color wheels. And so here I just did another little exposure adjustment to bring up the midtones and try to just give a little bit more dynamic range. You can see that I've adjusted the colors here in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. For me, I wanted the highlights to have that nice neon green color. But the shadows, I didn't want to have that same color, and also I wanted to bring some of the reds of the wood because the pine trees have some reds. So in the midtones and the shadows, I brought in some of those oranges and reds. So moving on to color adjustment, this was just kind of like a final layer that I did, and that was just because I wanted to lighten it up a little bit. And you can see that it's just a little bit, but it just kind of brings up those highlights while maintaining those nice dark shadows. And the last thing I added was just some vignette, and that is to just kind of focus the viewer in the middle and to also add a little bit of blur on the outside. It's just hardly noticeable, it's just a very small detail, but it really does make the clip look nice. Now, as far as editing, I of course added some nice titles just to make it look nice, some sound effects which we'll get into, and some little details that you may or may not even notice. Up here, if you look, I added a little, kind of the first glimpse of the monster here. And that was just kind of a, ooh, look what's up there in the woods. There's something happening, telling the story a little bit, So now originally the shot was actually just this pretty cool highlight shot. And I liked that, but for a short film, you kind of want to have a little bit more story. And so what I did was I took some more, just the raw footage, just some random clips that I didn't even really intend to shoot for this short film, because at the time I didn't even know I was going to make this film. And I was able to use them. So this is pretty cool. In this shot here, you can see that I'm sort of walking, right? And this is actually a drone shot, but what I did was I actually added a little bit of movement using some keyframes and some different handheld shakiness to kind of just give it that kind of feeling of walking through the woods. And of course I added some footsteps and some little branches breaking, just to kind of make it more realistic. I was able to kind of use the footage that I had and kind of just make it work. Now these shots here specifically were really poorly exposed. I'll go ahead and just show you real quick. This is what it looked like before I edited it. And so you can see I really pulled out as much detail as I could, but a lot of it was lost just because it was so underexposed. So this shot really didn't look so good, but fortunately the scene itself was so quick that, I think it's passable. So the monster, actually, I downloaded this kind of zombie template just from Envato, and you can see this is what it looked like originally. And so obviously this was not the look I was going for, and so I ended up doing a lot of editing to make the zombie darker and to remove a lot of the details, because honestly I didn't want you to see all the details. I kind of wanted to leave some of that just in your mind, but enough so you can see that he's a scary monster. And I did a lot of keyframing with this guy here. Let me zoom in here and you can see all the effort that I put into making this monster run and get bigger and really just kind of come at you through the woods, incorporating some blurs and some shadows, and really just trying to capture the monster and make it look as real as possible. But I am not by any means a professional editor or professional anything. Somebody who's really good at this could make this look 10 times better, but I was just having fun trying to make a cool video. This idea was pretty cool, where the monster runs away and then kills me, or the FPV pilot. That actually came from a guy on Reddit who suggested that, so that's how I actually came up with this idea. It was not even my idea at all. It was just taking feedback. So that's a pretty cool thing too, is just, put your work out there, ask for feedback, and then use the feedback that you get. Anyway, so I added a bunch of sound effects. These are all the sound effects here, and you can see there's a lot going on with these sound effects. For example, let's just open one of them. Audio animation. You can see that added cathedral sound effect, and that's really just kind of gives it this like echoey reverb, and just kind of want to make it sound interesting. Where's the man screaming? The man screaming's here, and you can see that I did some echo and some cathedral, and that's because I wanted it to sound far away and I wanted it to sound like it was echoing through the woods. But for this video, I just wanted to show what the DJI O3 footage can look like with some cool editing. But stay tuned, because I'm working on some new short films and some pretty cool editing stuff that I'm going to share with everybody. So anyway, I hope this was interesting. I hope you guys liked it. Please support the channel, like, subscribe, all that nonsense. Until next time, guys, John A. Cowboy, signing out.
DJI in control, signal strong, feel it right. Crashing hard, but this life ain't no end in sight.